Landings are one of the hardest things to master when you're just getting started with Flight Sim 2020. Luckily, there are a few different ways that you can practice your landings in the game. Whether you want to make your landing practice as realistic as possible by flying a full traffic pattern, or you just want to fly a final approach over and over, there's a way to do that in the game. In this video, I'm going to share with you 4 different ways to practice your landings, including 3 that only require you to fly final approach. So like I mentioned right off the top, the first approach you can use for practicing your landings is to do a full traffic pattern. As a side note, if you're unfamiliar with how to fly a traffic pattern, make sure to check out my previous video on the topic. I'll make sure to add a link in the show notes below. Or you can also check out the flight lesson on traffic patterns in the game. This is obviously the most realistic approach as with regards to real life, and it's how real pilots would practice their landings. But if you're just interested in flying the final leg, this approach will actually slow you down. That's where the next few game modes come in. They'll allow us to practice only this final segment right here. So if you're truly looking to practice just your final approach and landing, one of the best ways to do that is to use the built-in activities and landing challenges in the game. You'll find those under activities and then landing challenges. They can be really useful for evaluating your landings as well. For each landing that you're going to do, you're going to be evaluated on 3 criteria: precision, ground roll, and landing smoothness. That's really nice because it gives you an impartial evaluation of how your landing went. The other neat thing is that it's really easy to just click restart and try the landing again over and over and over. There are a few downsides to this approach though. Usually these landings are in fairly exotic locations, or as you can see, they're in strong winds. So it makes the landings a little bit harder than you would want them to be when you're trying to practice as a newcomer. The other problem is that you can't control which plane you're actually going to use to fly these challenges. They're all preset and you can't change the plane, you can't change the weather, so you're stuck with whatever's offered here. The other thing is when these challenges start, the plane is already in motion and you can't put the game on active pause. That means you need to set up your plane really quickly, and that can be a little bit hard and daunting when you're just getting started. If you want to have a little bit more control, that's where the next 2 game modes come into play. The last 2 strategies allow you to practice your landings at any airport that you like. So in my case, let's say I wanted to practice landings at my local airport, which is the Montreal St. Hubert Airport. I would just select it here, and I'm just going to launch the flight. So as you can see, I've spawned on the runway for takeoff. So to practice my landings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called Slew mode. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the game onto active pause, and then I'm going to activate Slew mode by pressing the Y button. This is going to switch me to the external view, and if I actually play with the controls, nothing would actually respond. The game is in a mode right now where you can move the plane, but you're not actually flying it. You're just using control keys to put it in a given position. So let's say I wanted to practice my landings. I could just use the slew keys that are programmed into the game to move myself into the right position. There we go. Once I'm in the right position that I want to practice in, all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the Y button to get out of slew mode. And because I put myself on active pause, the plane actually stays in place. That gives me the opportunity to set it up for final approach before we actually start moving. So in my case, I'll adjust the power settings. I'll just go to the external view. My flaps are all right, but as you can see, my landing gear isn't down, so I'll just put that down while I'm in pause mode. And once the plane is ready, all I would do is just fly my final approach. The other thing you can do from here is if you just want to repeat this over and over, instead of slewing back into position, what you can do is you can save the flight here by just pressing escape and going to the save button right here. If you want more detail on all these slew keys that you should be aware of, make sure to check out my previous video that I did on slew mode. I'll make sure to put a link to it in the show notes below. Slew mode obviously gives you ultimate control over where you want to start your flight and in what configuration when you combine it with the active pause button. The last mode we'll look at combines slew mode with a neat trick that's built into the game that isn't super well known. So I've loaded the game back up to the world map and I'm just at my local airport here. The trick that I was referring to is to actually, instead of choosing a departure airport, you just choose an arrival airport. So in this case, let's say I want to land at my Montreal-based airport. I'll just click on it. And what it's going to do is, you can see here, it's set a from already airborne at 1,000 feet in the vicinity of the airport. And if I zoom in, you can see I'm just on final approach right now. So once I click fly, I am going to start in the air on final approach, configured for landing. So the moment I hit ready to fly, what's going to happen is I'm already going to be mid-air flying the plane. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have one hand on the control stick and be ready to hit the active pause button. You can use the shortcut key as well, which is just the pause button on your keyboard. That'll allow the plane some time to adjust to any power changes you want to make or pitch changes that you want to make. So there we go. I am on pause now. The plane isn't moving. I can make any adjustments I want to let the plane restabilize with those modifications and then come off pause. Now the main problem with this approach is that you can't really control where or at what altitude you're going to spawn. But the neat thing is, if we just use the slew mode, which we saw in the last section, you can do whatever you want. In this case, let's say I want it to be a little bit further away. All I would have to do is go into slew mode again with the Y button. And if I want to back myself up a little more, I can do that. I can increase my altitude just so that I'm just about on the right glide path. Once all that's ready, I would just come off of slew mode again, restabilize the plane, make sure I've got my power settings right, come off active pause, and do the landing. The other neat thing, as you can see from this mode, is that we already have the flaps in the right position and the landing gear is down as well. So once everything's all set up how I want, I can just come off active pause and practice my landing. Just like with the other mode, if I wanted, I could have hit save so that then I could just reload this flight and practice it over and over. But in this case, I just decided to go for the landing since I don't really need the practice right now. So I hope you learned something useful with these different game modes. If you have any questions, make sure to put them in the comments. And otherwise, I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.